Okay, so hello everyone, welcome to another episode of AI and Oats, which is my daily show where I answer questions and react to news articles about AI, although generally I just end up rambling about AI normally. Normally I'd have a bowl of oats, hence the name, but I guess for the past 4 days running, I haven't had any porridge while I've been filming this, so I do apologise, not living up to the title, but tomorrow I promise the porridge will be back. Anyway, so let's dive into it, but before we start, who am I? Well, my name's Alistair, and this is my channel. If you're new, welcome, in all likelihood you are. Here I teach Claude Code and Codex for knowledge work and business use cases, but I also run an AI consulting and training business. So if you'd like to work with me to see how AI can fit into your business and drive more revenue, then please feel free to book a call through the link in the description. Or if you'd like me to coach you one-on-one to help you set up your own AI operating system in Claude Code or Codex, also please check out the link in the description. And then I also have a school community where I share my actual Claude Code skills and systems and everything like that. So again, feel free to check that out through the link in the description. Right, now that the preliminaries are out of the way, let's get into the questions. So basically the way this works is during the day I have a scheduled Codex task that goes and look through various forums about Claude Code, Codex and AI and finds interesting questions on news articles, puts them into this deck for me, and then I come home and I go through and answer them. So this is the first time seeing these, but yeah. Does anyone have higher usage than me? Wow. So this person has, I guess, the top tier max plan on Codex, having used 21.3 billion credits in the past year. That is a lot. I mean, it's obviously going to be heavily subsidized, but yeah, apparently, so they claim this would come out to 70 grand in actual API costs. But that because they're on the max plan, it's only been $1,200. Oh, so I guess they might not even have the top tier max plan if it's only been $1,200. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to comment on whether this person has the highest usage. I don't know. I expect some of the Codex, some of the OpenAI employees who use Codex all day and probably get, super duper subsidized token usage. I don't know. I would imagine it's almost free, or it probably is free, and they get to use, models that are pretty much like, multiple months ahead of what we as the public have. So they probably burn through even more tokens. But I do agree with the general sentiment here that if you want kind of bang for your buck in the subscription, definitely go with Codex. I think you get well, first of all, you get the opportunity to reset your limits if you hit them, but also I think you just hit limits less than you do with Claude. With Claude Code, and I think Anthropic. I feel like there was a point in the past when Anthropic were more compute constrained and therefore limits felt lower. I feel like now it's a bit better, but using models like Fable 5 and Opus 5, you will still you can still end up hitting limits quite quickly with Anthropic. So yeah, I guess I don't have a super spicy take on this, but I do think kind of like cost efficiency. If you're only going to go for one subscription, to maximize the usage you get, Codex is probably better. But in terms of the actual quality, I mean, I'd say it's close between Codex and Claude Code, but if I had to be limited to one, I do feel like Fable 5 is just kind of that top tier that you don't quite get with 5.6, even though I almost preferred GPT 5.6 as a daily driver in some ways. Anyway, on to the next question. Oh, okay, interesting. How are you all managing AI agent skills when your collection starts growing across projects? I won't necessarily talk about managing skills like per project, because obviously you can set up user level skills or project level skills. Generally, I probably slightly prefer user level skills, but then they do kind of, sometimes if you get too many of them, end up taking up context unnecessarily in different projects. But for things like front-end design or that sort of stuff, that's the kind of skill that I would want across projects. And that sort of thing. But what I would say is that I think there's a lot of merit to more than just managing skills. I would say kind of auditing skills fairly regularly, like every couple of months or so. I think I might have spoken about this in another video, but I definitely find that I have a good idea of making a skill at one point. And the skill is like good for what the models can do then. But then that skill eventually will just kind of stick around and hang around. But like, let's say I've probably spoken about this example before, but like, let's say it's a front end design skill, but not the like native one that Claude Code has. But let's say I make a custom design skill, and then I since then, let's say go, but in that skill I don't include anything like the fact that, let's say when I make this skill I don't have like a Higgsfield MCP set up or something, and then I go and learn better ways of getting Claude Code or Codex to do front-end design, like the idea of putting together a bank of examples for it, kind of giving it access to the Higgsfield MCP, telling it that it can create a video and then kind of like play that frame by frame as you scroll through the website to make it kind of animated website. And then I build another skill that uses that. If I had left the old skill in, then, and this has happened to me before, not with that specific example necessarily, but sometimes Claude and Codex will just kind of default to using old skills that you don't even realize it's using. Like I built a skill called hype check or something, which the idea is it was meant to take like people's LinkedIn posts where they would, or tweets or something, where they would say like, oh, I basically automated every single thing that ever possibly existed, blah blah blah, or like, oh, you need to download this GitHub repo, it's the best thing ever, and then just have Claude Code or Codex look at it, see whether what they say is actually true, whether it's possible, and whether my setup has it already. And that was a useful skill, and it's still useful for that, but somehow Codex kind of calling it in for random things that were unrelated, like just general pieces of news or research, and so that's the kind of thing that I had to go back and sort of audit and work out why it was doing that and clean it up a bit. And so I think there's benefit, because you'll make a skill at some point, then the abilities of the models will progress. Maybe you'll learn a new way to do stuff, new way to use the models. The models like Opus 5, Fable 5 should be prompted differently to Opus 4.8, for example. So your older skills will then sort of be slightly deprecated. I'm not saying they're not going to work at all. And it becomes very annoying if Claude just starts calling on them automatically when that's not what you want. So I think there's absolutely some merit to going back and either culling or cleaning up old skills just periodically. If you maintain Markdown files as memory for your AI workflow, where does this start breaking down? I would say, so I mean, things like Claude Code, I know, and I think Codex has something similar, have a kind of auto memory, which I think isn't super long. I guess it's like, I don't know how long it gets, I think, but or maybe the length isn't limited per se, but only the first, I don't know, 20 lines or something are read, and that kind of goes from session to session and that sort of thing, and keeps an immediate idea of what you're doing. I have the kind of system that I use with Claude Code and that sort of thing, a few systems of like Markdown files where it will write for itself things like a known issues thing. When I try to get Claude Code to use the Chrome MCP, for some reason it always crashes my Chrome and just quits it. So in the known issues, for example, Claude has written to itself, like, don't use the Chrome MCP because it crashes the Chrome browser, use Playwright instead, or now the in-app browser. But anyway, so that's a kind of memory file, and then I also have a sort of tasks.md, which is also sort of a memory file. It's a mixture of like all the tasks outstanding, but also all the tasks we've done in the past. And then I do have some other kind of general memory files about context. And what I found is that when I first set these up, I wasn't really thinking properly, or not that I wasn't really thinking properly, but I almost wasn't aware at that point when I thought this would be a good system to build, we'll give it a kind of persistent memory. But it didn't occur to me at that point that you actually don't want kind of infinite memory in a way, or certainly not as with Markdown files, because then these were getting larger and larger and larger, and that had a couple of issues. One is that the known issues were kind of having many duplicated entries, or perhaps even some slight contradictions, which I think was confusing Claude. And then the other thing is that, like, especially my tasks.md, it's just got enormous and like a huge bloated document that was getting read because I put in my Claude.md, like, read tasks.md every time, so you understand what's going on, because it's like a very good way of keeping track of where we are and what we're doing. Like, I think it's a good system, but I didn't kind of have the forethought to think that as it gets longer and longer, it's going to become a problem. So it would read a huge Markdown file. So eventually I set it up to the point where it like automatically cuts off the backlog at, I don't know what the line limit is, but I've set some sort of line limit on it. So that kind of fixes the problem. So in terms of where I think Markdown files as memory breaks down, I think, is if you don't have a system for kind of just keeping them within a reasonable length. And I guess my system kind of does. Well, I don't think it deletes entirely the old memories, because I feel like Claude does have quite good memory going quite far back of like all the work we've done. So I imagine what it does is probably offloads them into like kind of archives somewhere, but I've never looked into it myself. But that's what I would suggest if I were suggesting a system. I imagine is that like you take the stuff you cut out from the memory and then go put it somewhere else in some kind of archive that is searchable but not like automatically read all the time. I mean, in terms of other memory options, I know some people like using Pinecone, which is like a vector database. I've used Pinecone a little bit, but not extensively, so I can't necessarily comment on how brilliant it is. But I find like my Markdown system works, because then I also have a kind of like Carpathy style wiki, which was very popular at one point. Which is also a sort of memory system, or at least a detailed filing system, and therefore like contextual environment, and that's quite a good system as well, and it sort of self-maintains to some extent. So I guess what I'm saying is Markdown files are absolutely sufficient, in my opinion, as like a memory and context system for AI, but you just got to maintain them. What cloud agents do you use? I'm going to be honest, I don't use many cloud agents, but I was thinking I probably should start using cloud agents, because I feel like, well, obviously the nice thing about running like Claude Code and Codex and stuff locally is that they have all my files and that sort of thing, and actually more than that, because obviously I could put all my files in like a GitHub repo and then run a cloud agent that connects to the GitHub repo, and I have done that a little bit in the past. The main thing for me is that like computer use. Running it locally is the only way to get it to do computer use and that sort of thing, which is actually very useful, because that's when it's more like an Azure employee. But I could imagine if you're doing more kind of just like pure coding, or it wouldn't even have to be coding, I guess, just kind of pure like work on creation of artifacts and that sort of stuff, then yeah, I guess like I think the Claude Code cloud agents would be pretty good. Codex in the cloud as well. I suppose it's probably not quite a cloud agent, but I mean, I have my Hermes agent run on a VPS, so, and then that VPS has a sync to like the business documents on my laptop, so that way it kind of has access to the local documents like my computer would, but then the issue is it doesn't have like direct computer use, but I probably wouldn't necessarily want it having use of my computer. But what it does have is like browser automation within its VPS, so that's one kind of thing that works reasonably well. I think there's something called Devin, which I believe is a coding agent that like works very much in the cloud. I've never used it myself. I have heard some people speak very highly of it. I do think for like maximum efficiency, cloud agents probably are better, because like they'll run even if your laptop is shut, that sort of thing. But just for my personal use cases, like having computer use, having use of my actual like signed in Chrome instance and stuff, is very useful. So I still run a lot of agents locally, much more than I do in the cloud. But like I was doing a project the other day, like messing about with like a long running loop, just trying to build some demos. I think I mentioned it, but like I was trying to build a demo of like, can Claude Opus clone GTA 5, and I did that on a cloud agent, because I found if I was just going to run it constantly on my laptop, it was going to use up like all my laptop's kind of processing power, and my laptop was just going to be super slow, and that didn't need any computer use or that sort of thing. I mean, I kind of stopped that before I finished because it was using a lot of tokens. I might go back to it, use up the rest of my token budget for this week before it resets on that. But yeah, what happened to Claude Code after July 25th? Claude Code releases after July 25th. I don't necessarily know. I've been having a lot of issues with Claude Code over the past couple of days, but I think that's my own problem. I don't think it's anything with Claude Code itself. I think it's an issue with like my iCloud syncing on my laptop, but I've just ended up using Codex all the time, partially because, as I've said before, I think Codex remote sessions are way better in terms of like Codex working locally on your laptop, but you controlling it remotely from your phone. I just really like Codex in terms of how they've set that up. So I use that all the time during the day when I'm out of the house. And then, yeah, for some reason, like, Claude Code has just been super slow, and like, but I think that's an issue with my computer, not with Claude Code. So I'm not sure if anything did happen to Claude Code releases after July 25th. What's the biggest mistake people make when they first use Claude Code? Ooh, interesting one. I think it's probably not understanding, like, the importance of the very basic things of Claude Code, like a CLAUDE.md, like thinking about kind of the file architecture in which you're setting up Claude Code, probably about, like, in terms of providing it enough context. Like, I think that's still, in a way, like, the biggest issue people make with all usage of AI, is people just don't understand the importance of context. Like, my one kind of mental model I recommend to anyone when working with AI is, like, context is king, because just the context, like, the quality of your output depends so much on getting the best possible contextual setup, in my opinion. And, like, whether you want to call that an element of harness engineering, I think it's not, I'm not saying it's the absolutely only thing, but I feel like context is the highest leverage thing, because these models are very smart, but they're also predicting things, and the less information you give them, the more they have to infer and predict, and therefore the more likely they are to be further from your desired result. And, maybe they're getting better at inferring context, but I don't think it's brilliant. And when I say, like, getting the right context, I don't mean giving it all the possible context, because you can give it too much context and cause, like, context rot, confusion, contradiction, that sort of thing. But I feel like understanding the right amount of context and how to set that up when talking about Claude Code, specifically in terms of your file structure, I would say that's the biggest mistake people make with Claude Code and with AI in general. Alright, so I think that wraps it up for today's questions. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully there was some useful knowledge in there. If you did like it, then please feel free to subscribe. And just to promote myself again, if you'd like to see how my company Dux can work with your business to find use cases for AI that can grow your revenue and increase your productivity, then please feel free to book a call through the link in the description. Or if you'd like to join our school community, please check out the link as well. Thanks very much for watching, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.